Hi neighbor, it's your host Ashley. Welcome back to Front Porch Retreats. I'm so glad you've pulled up a chair today. Maybe I'm romanticizing it a little, but I think there's a certain kind of magic in that very first moment you meet someone new. It's like the opening line of a story, or a tiny, maybe sometimes shaky bridge we build between being total strangers and being known. I wonder if you've noticed how we love watching these brief moments in movies or on TV. You know what I'm talking about. It's when the characters first meet and they exchange a look or a hello, or sometimes it's awkward, and it kind of makes you cringe. But from your seat on the couch, you immediately recognize that that point of connection is going to change the whole trajectory of that character's future. But in real life, we're often conditioned to rush past these moments. We've got places to be and phones to check, and maybe many of us have "don't talk to strangers" still ringing in our ears from childhood. Now, I know it sounds a bit cliche to say we're wired for connection, but I believe it. A good amount of research has been done around a concept called weak ties. These are just those tiny, usually pleasant moments we have with the person at the post office or grocery store, or a neighbor walking their dog. It turns out these little blips of interaction do wonders for our daily happiness and go a long ways toward fending off feelings of isolation. Now, I'm not saying it's always like in the movies. Maybe not every brief connection with a passerby changes everything for us. But when we get good at making that first connection, we're really doing so much more than just being polite. And you never know, your next connection with a new person could open a door you've never saw being unlocked. In the bigger picture, all those small connections become woven into a collective social fabric that wraps up our communities and influences our cultures and practices. And the cool thing in my mind is we all have the power to influence the collective social fabric. It's up to each of us to make the whole beautiful. So, anyway, first connections. Today, Judith and I chat about some of the things we do personally when we're first meeting someone new. Don't forget to grab the free conversation guide that goes with this episode on our website at frontporchretreats.com. Use the conversation guide to initiate and experience more and deeper conversations in your own life. See our show notes for links and more information. And afterwards, stay tuned to hear the Try It Today challenge and get in on the fun. So, Judith, we've all been there at some point in our lives, when you're standing in front of someone new, and maybe it's a neighbor you haven't met, or maybe, you're starting a new class or a club or a new job, and you're feeling that pressure to, break the ice, and transition from complete strangers to acquaintances. So I think this is something that you do exceptionally well. And I'm curious, what are some examples of things that you do that help you make a connection to someone you're meeting for the very first time?
Well, it's interesting because I just did that. I was walking back from a neighbor's house and saw a neighbor that had just moved in. Yeah. And when I saw her, she was getting out of her car and went to get her mail. And I turned around and went back and introduced myself because I wanted her to feel welcome. And at that time, she shared with me a bit about why she moved there. And that gave us something to connect on. And it was an opportunity. It happened to be that she moved there for the purpose of her grandchild was being born locally. And of course, you go into the things around that, how wonderful it was she was able to move closer and that kind of thing. So you focus on the person, whatever their key thing that they're sharing with you, because they shared it for a purpose.
Mm-hmm. So you asked a question.
I did.
Like you introduced yourself, and you asked a question.
Yeah. Welcomed her to the neighborhood, hadn't seen her out before. And so look for things to connect on.
That's really important. Yeah. Well, we were talking about, before we started the recording, we were talking about walking in our neighborhoods and, what it is that, we do to engage people that we see, out in the neighborhood. And I should have started the recording earlier, I guess, because I think we had a good conversation. We were talking about when we were walking in our neighborhoods, what we do. And I think that's a really interesting thing because we were talking about how we tend to do it, but our neighbors, people that we see in our neighborhood don't always choose to do the same things. So I was sharing with you, I wave at everyone, whether they're, if I can make eye contact, I wave, so that's something that I do. I can't say that I always stop because a lot of times I'm trying to get my walk in. I have maybe 20 minutes before I need to get back to the house or, get back to work, and I'm trying to take a good desk break, and I wave, and I usually say hello if they're within hearing distance. Is that something that you do? Did you always do that? What other things do you tend to do to create like even a simple connection?
When I'm out and about, if I'm in the neighborhood or if I'm taking a walk along the lake, or anything like that, I will connect with people by identifying something that they are doing or that they are experiencing that I can comment on and hopefully bring them pleasure, whether it be, wow, I really like your shoes, or that's a beautiful dog you have. Because those are things that are important to people. Those are the sorts of things where they feel seen at that point. And that's the idea. I want them to know that I see them and give them the opportunity then to connect if it's in their benefit to do that. Unless I'm trying to find peace myself. And sometimes if I'm doing that, then I try to find a place where there aren't people.
Mm-hmm.
Because
which is often hard.
It is very hard.
We live in a pretty dense area right now.
We do. But I also do not become offended if someone chooses not to respond. Because if they choose not to respond, it could be because they're trying to find solitude.
I'm curious, like often when I'm in the neighborhood and I'm with other people, I wave, even if I do want solitude myself. I wave because it seems important to me to just acknowledge that another human is passing by or another being is passing by. But you were saying, maybe they're, when people are choosing not to engage with you, even in a simple wave, I often find that if I don't wave first, they simply don't wave at all. They won't even look at me, which is fascinating. So I usually try to make an effort to make eye contact, and then I wave my hand, I smile. It's not like I'm stopping or interrupting them, but I'm seeing them. Why do you think it is that, we often find, are people just craving, that alone time? So they sacrifice even a simple connection, as simple as a wave, because sometimes I can't make eye contact with someone. They won't look at me and I'm just passing 3 feet away. They won't look at me, and I find that really, really fascinating. Sometimes I wave anyway and they don't wave back. But what do you think is happening in those scenarios?
Well, oftentimes, whenever I see people and they are totally disconnected from the world around them, a lot of times I'll notice that they have the earbuds, and I'm guessing they're listening to a podcast or they're listening to music or something that they're consumed with. So they're not really experiencing their walk. They're not really experiencing the things that are around them and the people that are around them. They're in their own world. I think that that's one of the situations we face as a society, is that we are disconnected intentionally.
I often listen to a podcast, or recently I found this meditation walk recording that I've really enjoyed, which, it's about non-attachment. And I've been just trying to use my walks for the purpose of, letting go and observing. And I found this particular guide really helpful. But even when I am doing a podcast, I do tend to see people and still wave. It is truly never a full, I can't remember the last time I went on a walk and didn't see absolutely anyone. So I think that's really interesting. Kind of just taking us in a little bit of a different direction, let's pivot real quick. What would you recommend or how, just given I think you are, again, one of the people that I look to and think, wow, you are so good at connecting with other people. You do it so naturally. And it seems like that's not a skill that, and I think it is a skill. I think it's a skill that can be built. I don't think it's like, I'm just not like that or I'm just not good at that. If someone wanted to work on building, their skill base to, be able to connect really easily with other people on a regular basis, what would you suggest that they focus on doing? Or what are some small acts that people can try out in their lives?
That's a good question. I have always been blessed to see things about other people, whether it be someone is seemingly calm and caring, and then I'll notice that, especially if they're dealing with their children in a store and how well they're managing. If you can find the positives about a situation and acknowledge and reinforce that, that's a plus. But on the other hand, sometimes I'll see someone in the grocery store that's getting a vegetable or a fruit that I've never seen or heard of before, or don't know how to use it, and I'm curious. So curiosity usually works well for me, and I'll ask the person, because if you don't ask, you can't learn. And so learning for me is so essential to my life. I'll just say, what do you use that for? And then it opens up a discussion.
Yesterday, I had someone explain to me in the grocery store. We were just standing there together looking at the products. There's often an array of products to choose from, all the same product with many different brands. And I loved it. She looked at me looking at the different options, and she stopped and said, "Do you want to know how to tell which is the best price?" And I knew, but I was like, well, that's so nice. I wonder if she has another secret that I don't know. And I said, yes, I do. And while I didn't learn anything new, it was so sweet and so thoughtful. She took the time out of her day to try to help me on something. Even though I understood what she was already explaining to me, it didn't matter. It was the fact that she took the moment to try to help someone else, and that's worth something to me. That shows the humanity that I just think is so special, those moments.
It is a connection. It is a true connection. And I think that, and it's authentic. It's in the moment. It's where you might have a need to be served, and you serve that need without expecting anything in return.
So first connections, being curious is really great way to have a first connection. If you see someone that you want to connect with, getting curious about, something that they're currently doing, or complimenting them on something that you admire. Those are great ways and easy ways to, just create a very brief connection with someone. Those spontaneous connections, over time, you and I have talked about, like many people at your grocery store, but that didn't happen by one connection. You've met people, and we were at an event, and I remember you ran into someone that had worked at a grocery store, and you stopped to say hello to them. And that was a connection you'd built over years. So it was, those are small connections over long periods of time, that result in kind of those deeper moments of recognition.
And the way that happens is that I am curious, but I also really care about them. And so generally when you're checking out, you learn something about whoever's checking you out. And if they're having an operation, or if they're having a grandchild, or if their husband or their spouse is ill, the next time I see them, I ask them about it. And why do I do that? Because that's an important part of their life, and they're an important part of my life. And that's how I see it. We're connected for a reason. And if I can be of value to them, and it's not because I'm nosy, it's because I'm truly interested in their well-being. And their well-being is determined by the things within their world.
And do you see that that's how community is built? built over time?
I believe it is. I believe that's how communities built. I believe that's how families maintain the connection, because families can lose it too. People move away, people get very busy in individual lives, and it's not that they don't love the person or have love for the person, it's that it's not in their current realm. They don't think about connecting. It does take an effort. You have to have energy around. And sometimes people just don't use their energy that way. They're distracted by other things. They let other things pull them away from family members, who may be having a great time. They're going on a new direction, and you may not feel like that you're really engaged with them. But did you ask them a question about their new direction? Mm-hmm. Or did you just figure they didn't have time for you? I'd say it does take work. It's not something that people often realize. They get in such a busyness, and busyness gets in the way of sincerity.
It is also really easy to build stories around what you think the other person is experiencing. And I think that's going back to, the idea of, getting curious, whether it's with people that you first meet or, later connections that, are established, and you're just trying to, check on the person or, build that relationship further. It's so easy to fall into the idea that they just don't care, or, think about, what they must be experiencing, instead of getting curious. Mm-hmm. And maybe the connection is meant to deteriorate over time sometimes. Like, that's natural too. We can only connect with so many people, and, we only have 24 hours. Everyone has 24 hours to their day. There are only so many connections that you can make, but I think it makes for such a rich life when we do make connections, and then build on those connections.
Well, I make it a point for myself, only because I feel strongly about it. And I do have a lot of people in my universe that I know or have met and want to stay aligned with. And so I truly try to make at least one connection every day with someone. For some people, are miles and miles away. That can be through a text. Mm-hmm. For some people that are close in proximity, that may be just, going to the mailbox and waving.
Sure.
Or going to get their mail for them.
Yep.
That type of thing. Or, like I said, in a walk, running by, seeing someone I didn't know, and introducing myself. Mm-hmm. So it takes effort, but the blessings of it are so much. And if you make one person's day, one person, wasn't it worth it?
It's kind of like the domino effect.
Absolutely.
If you create one connection and help one other person be seen that day, maybe they're more likely to do that themselves. And if we all feel a little bit more seen, what a better world that is. In every episode, Judith and I both share a selected quote and why it resonated with us today. So Judith, do you want to share your quote about first connections?
First of all, this is by Steve Maraboli, and it is, "Smile at strangers, and you just might change a life." And it's a truth that I try to live by, because I think that you can set the tone for someone just by how you interact with them, and the smile can be the first form of interaction.
I really love that. Can you read that one for us one more time?
Smile at strangers, and you just might change a life.
So my quote for today is from Dale Carnegie, and it's, "The biggest mistake people make in first conversations is trying to be interesting. Be interested instead." And this really goes to a lot of what we were just talking about, which is, getting curious in those first conversations and, Judith, what you were saying about how you approach people and you look for something to connect on. And, that is a longtime piece of very solid advice there. Dale Carnegie concurs with you.
And I think well of him.
So I'll read that one again here. And the biggest mistake people make in first conversations is trying to be interesting. Be interested instead.
That's wonderful. And it's so important.
It's time for this episode's Try It Today challenge. These small, low-stakes experiments are designed for anyone, anywhere to jump in and join us in an exploration. We'll be doing them right along with you, and we'll share out on Instagram and Facebook at Front Porch Retreats. This episode's Try It Today challenge is a waiting space challenge. At some point today, you'll likely find yourself in some type of waiting space. Think checkout line at the grocery store, a doctor's office lobby, waiting for your order at the deli, waiting in the school pickup line, or at the bus stop or train station. Normally, that's when we instinctively reach for our phones to check our email or scroll through a feed. Our phones are totally our modern-day safety blankets. So here's the challenge. I want you to keep your phone in your pocket or your bag for the entire duration of that wait. Yeah, for real, all of it. Are you up for the challenge? Instead of looking down, look out. Observe what's happening around you. And here's the next level challenge. Only try this part of the challenge if you are in a place you feel safe. When you are, maybe try to make eye contact with just one person and offer a simple, friendly greeting. For example, a simple nod, a good morning, or a quick comment about the surroundings, like, wow, it's busy in here today, isn't it? That's all it takes. And if you feel up for something extra, try Judith's strategy of a compliment. Hey, cool shoes. Or what a beautiful dog that is. We want to hear what happened when you put the phone away. Did you feel exposed waiting without pulling out your phone? Did a simple comment turn into a conversation? Tell us what happened on Instagram or Facebook at Front Porch Retreats. Inspire us and others with your waiting space stories. Before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought. We've all felt that pressure when standing in front of someone new. But remember that these first connections are a vital tool we have for building a sense of belonging. When you feel that urge to build a story in your head about why someone isn't talking to you, choose a front porch mindset instead. Get curious about their story. Remember that most people are just as eager for connection as you are, but are waiting for someone else to initiate. It makes for a rich life when we invest that small bit of effort into those around us. Thank you for spending some of your 24 hours with us today. If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe to the Front Porch Retreats channel on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Front Porch Retreats. And you can find the full conversation guide for this episode on our website at frontporchretreats.com. Use the conversation guide to initiate and experience more and deeper conversations in your own life. See our show notes for links and more information. See you soon. Bye, neighbors.